Hi, I'm Zack Fine, and we're here to talk to you about Japan. Our group recommends not to invest in Japan, but before we get to that, let's share some simple facts. Japan is an economically and technologically advanced nation, a unitary parliamentary constitutional monarchy. That's a mouthful, but the monarchy is pretty much ceremonial at this point, so they're pretty much a parliamentary republic. They're a member of the G7, G20, APEC, and the WTO. They're very integrated in the world economy and world trade. They're the fourth largest economy in the world as of 2018 by purchasing power parity. Um, they're the third largest consumer market in the world and have the 11th highest population in the world, although we'll talk later about their population. They're considered a stable, non-corrupt, and well-regulated business environment. In fact, they outpace America in a lot of these metrics. So here we can see the Japanese economy by sector. Agriculture comes in last at 1.2%, manufacturing second to last, 20.7%, and service, taking up most of their economy, 69.3%. Abenomics is a series of economic policies named after former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He served for about 8 years and was very prolific, very well regarded. Japan has been following these policies since 2012, which is when his second term started, I believe, and the newly appointed Prime Minister as of 2020 is inclined to continue doing so. It's based on three arrows: quantitative easing, fiscal stimulus through government spending, and structural reforms using IMF and World Bank loan programs. The policies have had some mixed effects. Some economists are concerned about excessive value added at trade taxing, artificially constricting consumption. Policies fail to address the population crisis, which we'll get into, and the inevitable social security spending glut that the country faces. The population crisis, it's something that's going to define Japan's economic, global, cultural, everything, all of their development in the next few years. Already, Japan is a somewhat inverted population pyramid, which is really bad. If you look at the graphic, usually you want to see this slope downwards like a real pyramid, but as you can see, Japan is not in that situation. Japan's population could drop total below 100 million from currently 127 million by 2040, according to projections from the government boards and independent bodies. This trend has numerous negative effects. Japan currently has the highest percentage of elderly individuals relative to its total population in the world, which is huge because the elderly individuals are a dependent population that draws from Social Security without paying into it. So if there are too many of these people and not enough people adding to Social Security, which would be working age population, this is a very bad thing for government debt. It's a very bad thing for the continued stability of the economy. And already Japan has one of the highest debt to GDP ratios, around 200 ratios in the world, around 230%. This is not considered a problem because Japan is very able to pay back their debts right now, but looking forward into the future, we're not sure if this state of affairs is going to continue forever. Expenditures are going to skyrocket as the population ages and the current trend continues. There are unique socio-cultural phenomenons in Japan, the hikikomori, the parasite singles, people that are uninterested in having children due to financial or social or cultural factors. Japan right now is investing heavily in automation, regenerative medicine, so that people can keep working for more time in their lives, reproductive incentives, like state-sponsored dating programs in order to combat this trend, but they haven't reached their intended metrics so far. The government plans, as of 2018, Shinzo Abe made a statement that they plan to increase expenditures in childcare and programs to expand the workforce, such as including women in the workforce, policies that have run up against some cultural and social backlash. Speaking of which, it may be that Japan will have to mass import foreign workers, which will be tricky for a lot of reasons, socially, culturally, financially, and it remains to be seen whether Japan can handle such a transition. So we're going to go on to technology now.
For Japan's patent law, in order to submit a patent application, one must submit an official request to the Japan Patent Office stating the request, specification, claims, and any drawing necessary. Additionally, a foreign patent agent is required if the firm's offices are not located in Japan. OBWA states that in the past decade, the number of patent applications has continuously decreasing. However, they have been declining in small increments. However, in contrast to the decreasing number of applications, the given allowances have significantly increased. In the graph shown, we can see an inverse relationship between the patent filings and the allowance rate. For the blue line, the allowance rate, we can see that there's been about a 16% increase from 2011 to 2016. And for the patent filings, you can see a decrease from about 25,000 patent filings from 2011 to 2016. Regarding research and development, in 2018, Japan spent an all-time high in research and development expenditures on science and technology, spending 19.53 trillion yen, or roughly 189 billion US dollars. And this 19.5 trillion was about 3.8% of their GDP. Corporate research spending was about 13.79 trillion yen, representing more than 70% of the total, while academic research spending was 3.64 trillion yen, and nonprofit/public organization research spending was 1.6 trillion yen. The graph shown, we can see there's been a small increase each year, and in 2016 it took a pretty big dip relatively to Japan. And since then, the government kind of noticed that there's a decrease in spending. Since 2016, they've been increasing the number of money spent towards expenditures every year, and it's currently an all-time high in spending. Additionally, in 2018, the number of researchers stood at 867,000, increasing for the second year running and up 1.6% from the previous year. The average spending per researcher was 21.97 million yen. Statistics total number of researchers in research and development in Japan from 2010 to 2019. There's a 4.11% growth in the number of researchers. The number of researchers who are women has also increased over time. In 2018, 105,500 of the researchers were women, which made up 16.2% of the researchers in Japan. In 2019, the number of women research increased slightly to 16.6%. On the graph, you can also see there's been a small increases each year. In 2019, it was 874,000 researchers compared to 2010, where it was 840,000. For Japan's institutions, one of the more corrupt institutions they practice has been called a makajiri. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. But this is the practice of where senior Japanese bureaucrats will retire to top positions within firms of the private and public sectors. An official securing two or three top jobs like these could see a lifetime income and retirement allowances alone in the hundreds of millions of yen. Additionally, another big informal institution that has been practiced is keiretsu. Keiretsu is a Japanese term referring to a business network made up of different companies, including manufacturers, supply chain partners, distributors, and occasionally financiers. They work together, have close relationships, and sometimes take small equity stakes in each other, all while remaining operationally independent. And this was seen as corrupt because the firms would practice lobbying and many saw it as monopolistic.
Long-run growth rate of capital accumulation. Japan is close to its steady state. On the picture right above, help explain this. The picture is showing from 1960 until 2007. In the picture, we can see that the soiled line, which represents the investment, and from 1960 until 1969, the physical capital investment was continuing increasing. After 1969, it remained stable through 2007. Accounting for this information, the solo model predicts that the growth rate will increase by 1969 and then begin to converge to a stable state. By 2007, after 38 years of convergence, growth will be close to a steady state. The investment rate in Japan is relatively high. Japan has invested a higher share of GDP in physical capital than most other countries for a long time. As a consequence, it has a higher capital output ratio and a lower marginal product of physical capital than most other countries. In the picture, it has shown the annual data for Japan's share of GDP invested. So we can see there is MPK in the US and MPK in the Japan. And the Bank of Japan's real interest rate during 1980 to 2007. Japan has a high relatively depreciation rate. According to the research, the structure depreciation rate in Japan is around 10%, but in the US, it's only like 1.5%. And the depreciation rate of land in Japan is around 60 to 70%, but in the US, there is only around 10%. Population growth in Japan is negative. There is negative 2.0% annually for Japan, and the human capital is relatively low in Japan also, due to its negative growth rate. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Taj, and I'm going to be talking about monetary policy and how it's been conducted in Japan over time. So the Central Bank of Japan was founded in 1882, and its main goals have been to 1, stabilize the currency, 2, maintain a stable inflation rate of about 2%, and 3, just compiling data. And as you can see over time, the central bank has done okay at reaching those goals, but has had some issues. Like in the 1970s, there was a large inflation spike, like in many other countries during like the oil price shock. But to Japan specifically, they've had issues like in the 1990s on with deflation, and that's because of the stagnating economic activity. And even in the early 2000s, they experienced this issue, and the Great Recession compounded it by really slowing economic activity. And now, right when Japan kind of got out of this deflation cycle, they are experiencing another recession due to the coronavirus pandemic, which will call for a lot of economic stimulus and liquidity from the central banks. So the government was supervising the central bank until 1998, but now they only exchange ideas with the government. And as I said, like the economic slowdown in the 1990s and early 2000s called the lost decade. And there was also a credit crunch and liquidity trap that really messed the economy up and caused big issues for the central bank. And like I said, like Japan has lost a lot of economic demand in 2020, and I saw it was like projected that the real GDP will be back at 2019 levels by 2026 or so. Japan's economic growth has really been at a standstill, and even now, GDP has been completely stagnant since the 1990s, and it's still at those levels in 2020.
Hello, my name is Joe Barnes, and I'm going to be talking about the monetary policy in Japan. So first off, I just want to say that the monetary policy was conducted by the Central Bank of Japan that was also founded in 1882. And during this time, they had a lot of supervision from the government until 1998, and then after that, and until this day, they have been exchanging ideas with the government. So in the beginning, they were like looking to see. So the government was like try to be like on top of how the money flows, how money went in and money went out. But now it's more of like a free state. Like they're still talking, and it's more how the people control it. And one important time in the whole monetary policy was last decade that happened in the 2000s. So this is when Japan experienced an economic stagnation and price deflation, and they have suffered a lot of credit crunch and liquidity traps. This was due because how people were not spending money because they had a feeling that they can buy it more cheaper the next day. And one way that they were able to stop it was to do a process called helicopter money, which gives money directly to the user. And now recently, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Japan lost a massive amount of the economic demand because of everything that's going on. And the growth of Japan is appeared to be at a standstill for many factors because of the inflation rate of 1970, the growth in GDP, and the low inflation rate.
So I'm talking about the Great Recession. The Great Recession was a period of severe recession in the global economy that occurred between 2007 and 2009. It refers to the continuous contraction of the world economy over a relatively long period of time. The Great Recession is a crisis of relative overproduction in the process of the economic development, and it is also the decisive stage in the economic cycle. In the first quarter of 2008, global GDP fell by an unprecedented 6% annualized rate, and it's likely declined at a similar pace or in the first quarter of 2019. The downturn in Asia was even sharper. GDP fell by astonishing 50% on a seasonally adjusted annual besides in the first quarter in emerging Asia, excluding China and India, and by almost much in Japan. The series of problems has also led to rising unemployment rates in Japan. The unemployment rate rose by 0.1% from 2007 and 8. Even from 2008 to 2009, the unemployment rate rose by 1.1%. In order to solve these serious problems, in fact, after 4 consecutive quarters of economic contraction, Japan finally came out of the recession in early 2009 with an economic growth of 0.9%. Between April and June, then it grew by 1.2% between July and September. By deflation for the first time since 2006 has hit market confidence. Deflation means falling price, which is bad for the economy because consumers know they can buy the same goods at a lower price in the future.
So in conclusion, we advise against investing in Japan. We see Japan as a declining giant in the world economy. For one, they have the proverbial sword of Damocles hanging over them with this population crisis that they don't seem to be taking effective steps to correct. And even if they do change course and do the massive reforms needed to correct it, it's going to fundamentally destabilize their economy. And either way, it's really not a sure deal. Coming with that is the mounting debt to GDP ratio. Right now, not such a big issue, but in the future, we won't know for sure. An unclear path to COVID-19 recovery. As of November 2020, certain indicators of economic recovery, such as core machine orders, have not hit metrics that are conducive to the kind of quick recovery that we've seen in other Southeast Asian countries. there are archaic institutions, such as the ones Justin talked about, that are, again, not conducive towards continued economic growth. They hold back the country from realizing its full production. And to end, there has been ineffective central banking, poor policy that has enabled more than a decade of recession, and in fact, foreign treaties that have allowed the yen to be way overvalued in the past, which is part of why the lost decade even happened. So lack of foresight, you could say. So for all those reasons, we recommend against investing in Japan. It may be easy to be fooled by their technological, cultural presence in the world, but if you look a little closer, it seems that there's problems lying in wait for them. So that is our conclusion. Thank you for listening. Take care.